The screams weren't loud, but they were enough to make Senator Michael Kennedy stop mid-stride in the pale green hallway of Street Brook Veterans Hospital, his hand tightening around the folder he had brought for what he assumed would be a routine policy visit. He had come expecting numbers, charts, and polite tours. Instead, what he heard in that moment was pain, raw, human, and impossible to ignore. And that was only the beginning. Kennedy had built his public image on polished speeches and ambitious reforms, but nothing had prepared him for the thick, heavy silence of the hospital's long-term care wing. The floor smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like distant insects. Here, the cameras were gone, the crowds were gone, only reality remained. A frail voice called out from one of the rooms, "Is someone there?" Kennedy stepped toward the door hesitantly. Inside sat an elderly man in a wheelchair, eyes clouded but alert, his trembling hands gripping the wall blanket over his lap. "Sir, I'm Senator Kennedy," he introduced himself. "I'm here to check a box." The man finished with a bitter laugh. "They all come to check a box." The words hit harder than Kennedy expected. The man's name was Corporal Henry Dalton, a Korean War veteran who had spent the last 5 years in the hospital after a stroke left him partially paralyzed. Dalton spoke slowly, but every syllable carried weight. He told Kennedy about the good nurses and those who still found time to talk, and the nights when the understaffed ward left him waiting hours for someone to help him turn in bed. "I fought for a country I'd give my life for," Dalton whispered, "but sometimes it feels like it forgot me." Kennedy didn't know what to say. He simply sat down, lowering himself into the plastic chair beside the bed. For the first time that day, he truly listened. As the hospital tour continued, he met more veterans, each with a story more heart-wrenching than the last. There was Emily Reyes, a former Air Force mechanic in her 30s, fighting PTSD and survivor's guilt after an explosion claimed the lives of 2 teammates. She smiled politely for visitors but confessed quietly, when staff stepped away, that she hadn't seen her family in almost a year. "They say I'm strong," she murmured. "I just wish I felt strong." Then there was Tommy Pierce, a young Marine who had lost both legs to an eye. His room was covered in photos of him before the blast, laughing, lifting weights, playing basketball. He said he still dreamed about running. "They told me healing takes time," he said, "but nobody tells you how to heal your heart." Kennedy walked the halls in silence after each conversation. Each story chipped away at the distance he'd unconsciously built between policy and people. The statistics he routinely cited during speeches suddenly had faces filled with wounds that didn't end when the war did. But the turning point came late in the afternoon. A nurse rushed past Kennedy, nearly bumping into him. "We need another staff member in room 209 now," she shouted. Instinct propelled him forward. Inside the room, an elderly veteran named James "Jimmy" O'Reilly was gasping for breath. Panic etched across his face. 2 nurses worked frantically, but they were clearly overwhelmed. Without thinking, Kennedy grabbed the oxygen tank, rolling it closer, helping position Jimmy upright in bed. The moment Jimmy's breathing steadied, his hand clutched Kennedy's wrist. "Thank you," he whispered, tears filling the corners of his fading blue eyes. "I thought I was a broken bar alone." Those words rattled something deep inside the senator. The idea that someone who had once risked everything for his country could feel abandoned in his final years felt like a moral failure, one he could no longer blame on anyone else. By the time Kennedy left the hospital, the sun was setting, a hazy orange glow stretching across the parking lot. But inside him, something else was rising: anger, grief, and a fierce sense of responsibility. He sat in his car for nearly an hour, replaying the voices of Dalton, Emily, Tommy, and Jimmy, their pain, their resilience, their need for more than gratitude and parades. They needed action, and in that moment, Kennedy made a promise, one that wouldn't fit into a press release. He vowed to fight for stronger mental health funding, better staffing, modernized equipment, and policies that ensured no veteran would be forgotten in a quiet hospital wing. Not on his watch. The next morning, he walked into the Capitol not as a senator seeking political victory, but as a man carrying the stories of those who had carried his country. He delivered a fiery, heartfelt address, a one that surprised even his harshest critics. He spoke about Dalton's loneliness, Emily's invisible scars, Tommy's shattered dreams, and Jimmy's fear of dying alone. He didn't use statistics, he didn't quote studies. He spoke like a man who had finally seen the truth, and for the first time in a long time, the room listened. Several lawmakers approached him afterward, offering support. Funding proposals were drafted, hearings were scheduled. Momentum began to build, and not because of strategy, but because of sincerity. A few weeks later, Kennedy returned to Street Brook, not for a tour, but for a visit. Dalton smiled when he saw him. Emily hugged him. Tommy asked him to sign a basketball. Jimmy, though weaker, held Kennedy's hand with a gratitude that words couldn't convey. This time, Kennedy didn't feel like an outsider walking through their world. He felt like someone who finally understood. In the end, the visit that was supposed to last 90 minutes changed the trajectory of Kennedy's entire career. More importantly, it changed him. It reminded him and everyone who heard his story that the people who fought for freedom deserve more than honor and memory. They deserve dignity in life. They deserve to be seen, heard, supported, and sometimes, all it takes is one moment, a broken bar, one conversation, a broken bar, one unexpected encounter in a quiet hospital hallway to transform a leader into a true advocate. Because heroes don't just live in stories, they live among us, and we owe them more than we can never repay.